Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Forum at St. Bart's, where each week we explore important issues at the intersection of faith and the modern world. My name is Peter Thompson. I serve as the vicar here. I'm joined by our rector, Bishop Dean Wolfe, and our new assisting priest, the Reverend Canon Stephanie Spellers. Yay! There we go. Stephanie is canon to the presiding bishop for evangelism, reconciliation, and creation care. She's the author of several books, including The Church Cracked Open, which came out earlier this year. We had a virtual forum about that very book. And also Radical Welcome, which we are going to talk about today. Radical Welcome, Embracing God the Other and the Spirit of Transformation. It is out this week in its 15th anniversary edition. Prior to serving the presiding bishop, Stephanie was on the staff as canon in the Diocese of Long Island, and before that she was founding priest of the Crossing at St. Paul's Cathedral in Boston. She holds degrees from Episcopal Divinity School and from Harvard. Stephanie, we're really glad to have you officially on board, and we're glad to have you here to talk about the book today.
Amen. Thank you so much, Peter.
So tell us a little bit about this 15th anniversary edition. Why now?
Because we're not done yet, right? I find it hard to believe that it was 2006 when this book, Radical Welcome, originally came out. I was talking to the publishers just in the last year or so, really when we were kind of finishing things up on Church Cracked Open. And it's like, you realize it's actually 15 years since Radical Welcome came out. And what we were discussing was that it still feels very fresh. It still feels like a message that speaks to the church. And in my head, I thought when we started discussing reissuing it and actually doing updates, I thought, oh, there's going to be a lot of work I got to do with this book. There's going to be a lot of things that just don't speak. 15 years is a long time. Look at what's happened in the church and the world since then. And as I read back through, honestly, it was as if it had just been written like in the last year. The challenges of Radical Welcome, and especially just like as I was kind of walking back through it, the challenge of embracing the other, the challenge of facing our fear of change, the challenge of embracing God's dream and not clinging to our own. There's so many parts that kind of come up in this book that very much speak to who we are as church now and who we're trying to be. So it kind of felt like, all right, like in a way, I feel like I'm throwing a birthday party for myself, a little bit by saying, let's have a 15th anniversary edition and redo it and have chapters that are actually written by other people besides me so that they can also reflect on what they've learned about Radical Welcome over these years. But I hope it will be a gift. I hope that it will continue a conversation. I always say to folks that like when somebody writes a book, really what they're doing is they're issuing an invitation into conversation. Like when you're sitting there at your laptop, and surrounded by books and doing all of that research and everything else, you're hoping that what you put out there will be answered. That others will kind of take it up and poke at it and ask their questions. So I guess really it felt like, all right, 15 years, let's see where this conversation is now. So it's a joy to be able to do that kind of check-in, that temperature check, if you will, with St. Bart's especially.
Define Radical Welcome for us. It's a term that St. Bart's has used for years. What are its origins and how did you go about with this project initially?
Yeah, so I was actually looking back through, and it's kind of fun because when I wrote the book back again, and so it was probably like 2004 and 2005, I was doing research across the country, across America, especially with 8 congregations who seemed to have the marks of Radical Welcome. They seemed to be willing to be changed by the encounter with folks from the margins. And so I wanted to kind of just go in and see, what are they doing? How are they doing it? What does it teach the rest of us? And after the book came out, I continued traveling. I continued doing workshops and sessions and hearing back from people too, actually. And so a part of what's in this book is actually a refined definition of radical welcome that's a little sharper than the one that's embedded in the book itself. So can I read this?
Absolutely.
All right. Radical welcome is first and foremost a spiritual practice. It's a spiritual practice. It combines the Christian ministry of welcome and hospitality, which we kind of expect. You know, that word welcome is in there. So welcome and hospitality with, and this is the key, a faithful commitment to doing the theological, spiritual, and systemic work to eliminate the historic systemic barriers that deny the genuine embrace of groups often oppressed and marginalized in our churches. So you could sit and kind of unpack that for a while, you know, and say, all right, so you have this ministry of welcome and hospitality, which churches love. We love saying we're warm, we're welcoming, we enjoy having new people. Everybody loves us and we love everybody. Whether that's true or not, you know, it's kind of what we like to say about our churches and kind of one of those core ministries of our church. But then you get to the radical part. And actually, as I was looking back through here, I found a quote from your former rector, Bill Tully, who, when I interviewed him, actually as a part of working on Radical Welcome, and he was the one who said, let me see if I can find this quote here. I think I'll remember it actually. He said that radical is getting to the roots. That radical is actually getting to the root of Jesus' ministry. So when you make that welcome radical, you're actually looking to see, but how would Jesus be welcoming? How would Jesus be engaging with folk on the margins? And if you watch him, you see, like there's really no mystery here. It's almost a rhetorical question. It almost answers itself if you just look at the life of Jesus. Then you see what a radical welcome looks like. You see how often he went to the folks nobody else wanted to be around. Went to the folks who were seen as other in their context, whether because of their religion, because of their ethnic or cultural identity. They were other because of their work, and because of their bodies, the shapes of their bodies, the conditions of their bodies, because of their minds, because of the way their minds worked compared to the way other folks' minds worked. All of those things, Jesus sought those folk and said, I believe that you will be a blessing. I believe that God is working especially through you. Liberation theology would call it the preferential option for the poor. Jesus had that preferential option for the other. And that's what radical welcome does. Radical welcome goes out seeking and says, we don't just want to welcome you into our life, but we actually want to welcome you to change our life. And I'm going to say that one again. Radical welcome is not just about welcoming people who have been excluded from the church to be a part of your life as it is. That's actually not really radical welcome. Radical welcome is saying we welcome you to come and change us. We welcome you to come and help to shape what God's dream looks like in this place, because we don't know until we hear from you what God is up to. That's radical welcome. And then the definition goes on. As you practice radical welcome, you join Jesus in stretching your arms and embracing the other. You share the gifts of your tradition and culture. So there's an exchange. It's not that you ignore everything you've been, I so often heard over the years, as I was presenting and sharing with folk about radical welcome, one of the first things people would say to resist it was, "But you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater." And I feel like that's kind of one of those Episcopal blocks that we throw up to anything that might be uncomfortable or anything that might change us, is, "But you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater." No, we're not. We're still Anglican. We're still appreciating the traditions that brought us to this day, traditions that we love and that continue to shape us. But they can be adapted. They can be in conversation with something and someone else. So you share the gifts of your tradition and your culture. Know what it is you got. Celebrate it. Even as you allow your heart and your congregation's life, its ministries, its identity, its worship, its relationship, its leadership, to be transformed by the other's presence, gifts, and power among you. So there is an exchange. Again, as I was walking back through, I remembered how much I loved hearing the words and really understanding the witness of Miroslav Volf. Did you study with him at Yale at all? I was hoping you had, so we could
I'm familiar with his
There
stuff.
you go. So Miroslav Volf is a theologian who is based at Yale, someone's alma mater. And he often spoke about this dance of the embrace. And to me, that's what we're inviting folks into, and that's what we're invited into when we practice radical welcome. That first you gaze upon, you meet this other. And let me see if I can find this in here. I'll remember it. It begins with kind of that encounter, the encounter with the other. So in this case, it would be St. Bart's, encountering whoever it is who might be different. And in fact, I'll use a specific example kind of to like break it down. So St. Bart's encountering, for instance, the many, many, many folk who are unhoused, who live and who make their being, they make their home, they make their lives right along the northern edge, right along the northern wall of this church. So radical welcome, that embrace that Miroslav Volf talks about would be, how will you encounter, for instance, that other? How will you encounter? And so that first step is simply noticing that other. Then there is the opening. And the thing about exercising radical welcome, when you were the one with privilege and power, words, I didn't talk a lot about privilege back then, I do now, but when you were the one with privilege and power, you open first. You open first. So it's encounter and then opening. You open. And you let that other who has been marginalized, who has been wounded by structures that support you, by structures that your culture built or that were built in order to favor you. You open your arms so that they know this is a safe place. This is a place that will honor you. So you open. And then you wait. That's the third step. The third step in this dance of embrace, you wait. You wait for that other to look at you and to say, can I trust you? Because y'all have not been good to us. Or again, using the example that I just raised, people who were unhoused might say, we love how you've allowed us to shower and you've shared food with us, but when we come inside, it feels like we're second-class citizens. On a Sunday morning, you don't seem to want nearly as much to do with us as you do when we're out here and you can kind of help us. So you wait. Radical welcome says we sit and we wait, and we allow that other to check it out, to check in to see, will it be different? Or is this a bait and switch? Are you about to do to us the same thing that you've always done because you have this power? So you wait. And you wait for that other to open to you. And again, this is a tough one. And especially today, I think of a lot of the racial awareness and the racial, kind of the work on racism, the anti-racism work that many of our churches are doing. And I think of how often, I feel like majority white communities, they'll do the opening, maybe, they might do the waiting, but there's also this kind of tapping their foot that I see where it's like, when are you all going to get over this? You know, Black people have to reach out to us too. When are they going to get over whatever it is that's holding them back? Because we actually are very willing to receive them, but they don't seem to like us. Radical Welcome dismantles that. It humbles you. You wait, and you acknowledge that there are so many reasons why that other is not coming to be with you, does not yet trust you. And again, I feel like today we see those systems in a way that we didn't even have a language for talking about, certainly in church circles 15 years ago. We couldn't talk about systemic racism. We weren't talking about white supremacy. I don't think the phrase white supremacy showed up once in this book. I don't think it did. We weren't there, but now we can talk about the weight of history and the reality today that explains why so many folk on the margin don't trust this beautiful church. Don't trust the goodness that you understand yourselves and that I understand us to have in our hearts. And so we wait. We wait for that other to open. And they get to decide what they will or not. They get to decide. They may turn around and walk out. And we have to sit with that. And we have to sit with it without guilt, which is another thing I feel like we talk more about nowadays, right? Like the white guilt or the guilt that many of us experience because of class privilege, or the weight of being a straight person, knowing how much privilege has been heaped onto you that you didn't ask for just because you love people who are of a different gender than yours. But that privilege is real. I feel that. So I feel that, but the question is like, how will I not be paralyzed by that? But instead I wait and I take on, I admit that, I'm a part of a group. I am a part of a system, and that system has given me so much that others do not have. And the other may or may not want to cross over and to be in relationship with me. That's their call. But if they do, and there's union, then something starts to happen. When that other says, all right, I'm going to test this. I'm going to see if you mean it. I'm going to come from the northern wall and come in on a Sunday morning. Maybe 3 unhoused people together might say, there is church inside there, inside that building. What if we all went in together? And if they came in, could St. Bart's allow itself to be changed? Could St. Bart's begin to ask questions about the degree of literacy that it assumes people have when they walk in? Could our worship be not quite so wordy? Could our songs be, and I know Peter and how much you love like the music that fits, that fits the readings for a day, and that that there have been discussions you've had with friends. We were actually talking about this week at dinner. So can we choose songs that we know that folk who can't read music could sing? Or are we going to hold to the idea that but this is the perfect song for this day, and we know that only 5 people can sing it, but it's just so perfect. Could we change that calculus? Could we change that calculation if we knew that there are going to be people in our midst who have never read a lick of music in their lives? What are the things that would change because of that relationship? And then, and this is, I'm still working through the dance of this embrace with Miroslav Volf, but also the dance of radical welcome. If we do have that sweet communion, if there is that moment when we come together, eventually we release. So radical welcome is not about you absorbing me or me absorbing you. It's actually about us transforming something in each other because we love, because we are connected, and then releasing and looking at ourselves and saying, oh, wow, this is me now. And I feel this part of me that's different because of you. And there's this part of me that feels a little bit different because of you. And there's a way that I think now that's different. A question that I've never asked before, and I'm going to start asking it now because of you. So radical welcome changes something in us. You don't lose who you are, but who you are gets fuller. And what I find is that that's exciting. I know that for a lot of us it can be scary, and for me sometimes it's scary too. Who am I kidding? But that transformation, that journey with God into who it is God is calling us to become, you're on that when you're embracing that other. That's the journey. That's why it's a spiritual practice.
Stephanie, I was thinking that we're kind of moving beyond the melting pot metaphor.
Oh, yes.
You know,
yes.
that often that we think, well, they'll come in and be like us, and we will transform them, not in God's image, but so they look more like us, sound more like us, think more like us. I was going to ask you, what do people not get about radical welcome? But I think you really answered that. It sounds like what we mostly don't get is radical welcome changes us and the people we're welcoming.
Amen.
We have to be open to the change.
Amen. Amen. Which is hard to do when there is power and privilege in the mix. And that's, again, I think that's a piece, like it was included in the definition. I talked about it a lot throughout the book. But what I heard as I traveled the country and did, again, the workshops and just been in conversation with folk for these 15 years, is that that's the part, Dean, that's the part that folks just kind of glossed over, or that honestly I don't know if we had the tools to do that kind of analysis of our systems and of ourselves, and how power and privilege have so shaped our church's life, that until you can talk about that, then you're not really going to be able to truly make a way for the other to make a home in your midst. Until you can really talk about privilege and power, and how you can not lose your privilege, because I feel like I could say, well, I will no longer have straight privilege. It's like, how convenient, you still have it. But what will you do with it? How will you transform? How will you hold it differently? How will you use that privilege and leverage it for the sake of the liberation of all? Until we can talk about that, we're still going to be in that old power dynamic where folk are really being changed by us and we're not really being changed by them. But we could be. And God willing, we will be. Yeah.
I know Stephanie is eager to hear from all of you. We do, for the first time in a while, have a microphone set up here. Just a few ground rules. You're welcome to come up and ask Stephanie a question or share a comment. We ask that you don't crowd the microphone, that you don't touch the microphone, and that if you come up, you wait until you're up here to take your mask off and make sure you put your mask on before you return to your seat. If you're watching online from home, you can also email me, pthompson@stbarts.org. That's pthompson@stbarts.org. You can use the live chat function on YouTube, the comments function on Facebook, lots of ways to get your questions and comments in.
Yeah.
Stephanie, I was struck by in the in the introduction that you wrote for the 15th anniversary edition by one section, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little more about it. You're writing about, this is the very first part of your introduction to
What
the
page
15th
you on?
anniversary. XV.
Oh, that really is the first page of it. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm with you.
You're talking about the push-pull around inclusion, and you say it says it wants certain groups, says it supports and values us, only to undermine, marginalize, or silence us if we do or say that which does not advance the dominant culture and agenda. In other words, mainline churches love young people who play Bach cantatas and Latinx people who have mastered Robert's rules, while they tend to hold at bay Afro-Caribbean people who are not high church and LGBTQ people who are a bit too queer. The institution wants diversity for decoration, to assuage guilt, and yes, to address the sin of oppression, but generally on its own terms. And I'm wondering if you can...
Hey, don't hold back.
Yeah, I clearly had something I wanted to get off my chest, didn't I? I wrote that, and then I actually checked back in with my editor, Nancy Bryan, who is my sister in so much of this journey. And I was like, Nancy, is that really okay to say? She's like, say it, Stephanie, say it. Everybody needs an editor like that. This is what our church does. And I see people nodding. We know this. Like when we look, let's just be honest. If you can't be honest in Christian community, where can you be honest, right? If you can't be honest in a place where you know the foundation is love, if you can't speak the truth in love in that place, where will you ever do it? So, yeah. And I think some of this was my own experience over these years. I've been an Episcopalian now for 20 years. At the time that I wrote this, I'd been Episcopalian for about 5 years. So there were definitely people who were like, where did you come from? Man, who do you think you are, little girl? I guess I couldn't say this then. But now I'm like, I got 20 years under my belt in this church. I've seen the way we do some stuff. And what I know is that I, as an African-American woman with a degree from Harvard, with, my mom, raised us by herself in Kentucky, but, in a small city in Kentucky. But she worked at AT&T when I was growing up, and that means that I talk like NPR, right? And people will come up, we love the way you talk. I'm like, well, thank you. And I know that if I spoke like my brother, if I spoke like my cousin Frida, who is a wise, wise woman, who didn't get past high school, but boy, you need to hear Frida. I was just talking to her this week, and she writes me texts, and she'll call and stuff, and boy, I love working stuff out with Frida. She ain't gonna sound like St. Bart's wants to hear. She's not gonna sound like somebody that the Episcopal Church would trust with power. Everybody loves it when, when they see me, with my prayer book, and they can see, that I can quote certain pages out of there, and I can, and I can talk about The Crown, watching The Crown on Netflix and do that whole Anglophilia thing, and I know the game, and I shouldn't have to play it. Damn it. We shouldn't have to present to prove that we've mastered Anglo culture. Yeah. Well, and LGBTQ folks should not have to prove that they could pass for straight in order to get through an ordination process still, or just not be too queer. I still remember a friend, I did a friend's wedding. He's an Episcopal priest, gay man. I'm godmother to his 4 children. And his wedding, at the reception, his husband was dancing, and he leaned over. It's like, well, I guess now they know that I'm not just homosexual, I'm gay. It shouldn't be a choice. We shouldn't have to leave parts of ourselves outside the door for this church to let us in.
Is this part of why we wonder why we are not growing as we think we should?
Well, and this is where it hits the road.
Just to put the cookies on the lowest shelf.
Well, what do you think? Say more about that. Tell us more about them cookies.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that we want to grow and we want to introduce people to a way of life that we've found meaningful,
yes.
But we are very reticent to be changed by people coming in through our doors. Mm-hmm. And I can feel it in my own, prejudices, mm-hmm. and in my own white entitlement. Mm-hmm. And so, I think one of the things, we talk a lot about a variety of isms, but I've sometimes thought that we were more likely to break through on race than we were on class.
Yeah, elitism. Oh, and that's some of what I'm saying too about, and I actually see, hey, you. There are now two of us, two black folk who have that Harvard thing and probably know. I'm looking over here at Sophronia Strong, who was a part of your forum. Was it 2 weeks ago? Just last week. So
back already.
Hey! But yeah, we know what it's like to kind of to be able to pass through the wall or pass through the door because elitism is actually that is often more the deciding factor in our communities. Again, if you can play the part, then we're good. If you can be, and we haven't even talked about this, but if you can be the black woman who speaks about Thomas Merton, then everybody loves having you around. Amen? Amen? Yeah, but if you were the black woman also talking a lot about or leading with Howard Thurman or any number of other mystics from our home traditions, would the invitations be forthcoming in the same way? Probably not. You were going to say something else.
Yeah, but it's connected to what you were saying. Yeah, I get that too. People love the sound of my voice.
Oh, yeah.
And my hair is so pretty.
Oh, yeah.
But it's been 10 years in my church, and this is in my home church.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is this the only thing you can say to me?
Right,
so to me, radical welcome is going beyond those surface comments to talking to me like you know me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So ask me about my life. Ask me about what I'm writing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I want to ask you about is how do you get people to go beyond that? Because they think they're doing pretty well. Just acknowledge your voice and your hair and you're so nice and you look good. And so, but how do you go beyond that?
Yes. And again, I think that for me, the model is Jesus. The way that Jesus would meet people in their spaces, on their terms, and he would ask those questions, right? He was genuinely curious. We so often lead with the teachings of Jesus, but we forget that Jesus asked a lot of questions. He wanted to know. And so, for instance, even in this exchange that we just heard in today's gospel with Pilate, Jesus is doing that thing that he does, where they're like, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Well, you say that, but actually, I want to hear more about why you think this. I want to hear more. So, how do we lead with curiosity? And I think that leading with curiosity, leading with humility, wondering how will this other person, especially given the things that are different about them, how will they bless me? What is there that God is waiting to reveal for me that I would never know except that I sat back and listened to this other?
To have a conversation with someone as if you know them means that you have to know them.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you have to ask real questions, be vulnerable yourself. It's been interesting to me to watch Coffee Hour evolve over the pandemic online. Coffee Hour on Zoom is actually a much more intense experience. It is not as light. You know, it's not, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? It's like, you know, people like dig down. I used to joke that I'm going to have to get prepped for Coffee Hour because, you know, it was just a deeper exchange.
Well, and how do we invite that? Like, how do we invite that deeper knowing? That deeper knowing that again, Jesus models in our midst. You know, like, anybody else would have walked by Zacchaeus and that tree, you know, and, you know, I love that image of like this short guy, the tax collector, I think, right? He's up in a tree watching as Jesus goes by, and Jesus misses nothing. Jesus is like, hey, Zacchaeus, I see you up there, little man. Like, come down. I want to come to your house. I want to see how you live. I want to walk with you. And Zacchaeus is so shocked because nobody else interacts with him that way. You can tell. Most folk are keeping that distance from Zacchaeus. And so when Jesus extends that kind of welcome, the kind that doesn't just say, hey, Zacchaeus, come along with me to wherever I'm going, but says, Zacchaeus, can I come where you're going? That's solidarity. And that's another piece of like what I have experienced shifting is how do we actually go where others are? And because that's what Jesus is doing with Zacchaeus. He goes to this man's home, and it's because Jesus goes to dwell with him that Zacchaeus' life then is completely transformed. He's like, I'll give it all up. All the stuff that I took, I know I wasn't being cool the way I was doing tax collection. I knew that I was pocketing a lot, and that's why this house is lavish. I know that, Jesus, but I'll give it back. I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll follow, I'll be transformed. But it's because Jesus is wanting to know him and is curious about him. How can each of us practice that kind of curiosity? What would that look like in your lives? I'm going to name like another person who's in the room right now is Rob Rapke, who leads Episcopal Relief and Development. And we've gone on pilgrimage together. And we made pilgrimage to Ghana, and that was such a blessing. And one of the things that I saw and so appreciated, Rob, about the way Episcopal Relief and Development does what it does, is that you all are curious. That people that I met who were working as a part of projects throughout Ghana with you were known. That they had gifts, and that those gifts were the gifts shaping what was happening. It wasn't just Episcopal Relief and Development coming in and saying, oh, we got to fix you. Like, y'all don't do that. And you have structures in place that stop you from going to fix, right? Yeah, thanks be to God for that. I feel like we've learned a lot about how to interact in our mission work. How do we also bring that how do we bring that wisdom, the wisdom of Episcopal Relief and Development, into the way we do the rest of our church's life? I feel like you all could be you are teaching workshops. I know you all do a lot with asset-based community development, and we teach with you on that. Like, there are ways of developing these skills. The skill of listening, the skill of being curious, the skill of assuming that there is already power, unacknowledged power, but power nonetheless, in that place, in that group of people. And the reason you're there is not to give them something. It's to find out what God was already doing and to join up.
We have time for probably one more question from the audience, so if you have something, please come up by the microphone. We do have a question from our online audience.
Please.
Actually relating to the comments about music, because people feel very passionately about music.
I know.
Is there a way to mix the old and the new without losing either those who love high church and those who love Christian rock? And I guess what I hear underneath that question is, how do we blend different people, different desires, different interests, different backgrounds together into one?
What do you think?
I mean, I think you have to start. You have to start that.
Yeah.
It's a process, and it's not going to be easy. But I think I do think blending is the answer.
Yeah.
But it is not either or.
Right. Again, it's like the melting pot. That like I feel like some of like what the melting pot would do around music would say that there is a base tradition that is truly who we are. And then we'll have some additions, some extra little pieces of things that are like accoutrement. These little additions that decorate what we are. And that ultimately will change some. So for instance, when we do spirituals, we'll do them still in this classical style. Uh-oh, she went there. So we'll still do them so that they are identifiably Anglican. That's the melting pot. Radical Welcome would actually be curious about, what does this music sound like when it is sung by people for whom this is their heart music and this is their culture? And how do we welcome that into the life of our whole church and allow ourselves to be changed? How do we not just say, well, we do music that our music leaders feel comfortable with because they've been trained for it. Maybe we need different musical leadership, so that folks who for whom this is their authentic heart language, this music is, whether it's gospel or different kinds of world music, let's have them teach us the way they sing this, the way they embody this. And we'll share the way we do it, and the way we do it won't disappear. Again, it will not disappear. This is not either or. One of the lessons, and it's the hardest thing for dominant culture to understand, is that there are other ways of being in relationship. That relationship is not only about encounter and dominate, encounter and subjugate. That I feel like what's underneath this question is really the reality of the way that European culture and male culture have grown to interact. They only know, and I say this in that quote that you offered up, that we have mastered being masters. We don't know how to be partners. And so when that new culture or that different culture comes in, the fear is, you're going to dominate us just the way that we've dominated you. You're going to make us disappear just that we made you disappear. Remember August of 2017, Charlottesville? Those folks marching in the streets with their tiki torches, the Jews will not replace us, you will not replace us. They didn't have a way of imagining that we could be in this together, because they hadn't seen much of it. Yes, we can blend, but to do it, we will have to let go of dominant narratives and dominant ways of being that are deeply, deeply entrenched in the life of Anglicanism. But that's the challenge. That's the gospel challenge. That's the salvation of this church, is learning to not dominate, but instead to be in relationship and partnership. That changes all of us.
And one of the fun things about the work that I've had the privilege of doing, and probably the work you've had to do where you're traveling all over, your image of what is a classical Anglican Episcopal church really evolves.
Yes.
Because there are no two of them that are really exactly alike. And there is really a lot of diversity in terms of worship and music. kind of out in the field.
Yes, out in the field. Make room for that. Make permission for that. Our bishops are still learning to do that. You know what the House of Bishop does every time legislation comes along.
No.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Stephanie. Right?
The answer is no.
You know, that again, our structures are so much about enforcement instead of permission. And they're about knowledge instead of curiosity. And they're about domination instead of partnership. Look to the life of Christ, and you will see the better way. And that's the invitation. I love the idea that we get to do that together.
Well, we should probably stop there as we all have to get to church, and hopefully you all do for our 11 a.m. service. The book is Radical Welcome, Embracing God the Other and the Spirit of Transformation. We actually, for the first time in a while, have it on sale in the back. Paula has books, so come and see us and come and see her and get your copy of the book if you don't have it already. Stephanie, it's a real honor to have you among us. Thank you for being with us for the forum today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, St. Bart's.
We do hope you join us for worship at 11 a.m. Next week, there is no forum. Instead, there will be an Advent fair here and on the terrace. And then the following week, we'll welcome Lynn Castile-Harper, who's the minister for older adults at Riverside Church. And she's going to be talking about the spirituality of dementia. Hope to see you then.
Wonderful.